in Star Wars, A New Hope, where Luke is flying to the Death Star, and he is the last one left out of all the X-Wing fighters. He is the only shot at hope for the entire galaxy. He has to get his little torpedo into that tiny little spot in order to blow up the Death Star. Yes, or whatever. And at first, he takes out, as he's approaching the target, he takes out his targeting computer, right? And he's looking through that. And, it's, I don't know, lining things up or whatever. And it's getting ready to tell him exactly when to fire his little torpedoes. And then Obi-Wan Kenobi, speaks from beyond the grave. And he's like, use the Force, Luke. And he goes, okay. And then he puts away the targeting computer. And he completely relies on the Force, on his instincts, to make this extremely important shot to save the entire galaxy. And of course it works, and everything's great. Well, today I want to talk about putting away your targeting computer and using the Force, using your second nature in order to do something. And it's much harder than you would initially. Well, we all know this. It's very hard to trust instincts and rely on something that you can't fully explain. But yeah, so that's kind of the concept I want to talk about today.
Okay. Well, first off, a huge spoiler for Star Wars if you haven't seen that.
Okay.
Anybody who's been putting that off for 60 years is ruined.
It's okay. They blow up the Death Star like 10 more times in every Star Wars movie.
That's a spoiler to every Star Wars film.
Right. But this was the original one. The first time they blew it up. But anyway.
Back when it was cool. Okay, so let's talk about that.
Okay. Okay. To be completely honest, I think I'm way overly excited about this concept. About, I don't know, all of this stuff. The thing we talked about last time with, the chain of progress or the big string of knowledge or connecting all of these things. I think there's probably quite a few different concepts, but all of this stuff makes me really, really excited. And I'm not 100% sure where to start, but what I kind of had written down a few notes for me to remember, because in the last few weeks, I think that I have done something right for the first time in like a decade. I feel like I have cracked some code for myself that I'm fully aware it might go away, any day, and it's whatever. But I feel like I'm doing something much differently than I've been doing in the last like decade or so, and it's just working really, really well. So I've been trying to write down notes to remember what's happening and try to figure out why it's working or what I'm doing or whatever.
Well, but before you get into that, let me just quickly tell you where I'm at. So I am not there. I have not been in that state of euphoria. There's, of the things that we've kind of talked about on the different little arcs that we've had throughout the podcast, a lot of the early ones have slowly but surely become pretty good for me. Like my sleep is really good now. Fitness is doing really well. Like there's just a lot of these areas, especially around habits and daily stuff, that's really started to click. But this particular thread, the not overthinking things, not being in your own head all the time about this stuff, about, turning off the targeting computer, I am not there. And I've, explored some areas and made a little bit of progress, but this is still a major area of interest for me. So I'm kind of in a different place than you, and that makes me very excited to hear kind of your take. And
perfect,
just tell me what I need to do.
I don't have it all figured out, but something's working really well. So I'm trying to figure out exactly what that is. But
okay,
all right, where to start? You know what? I'm just gonna start going through my list. I don't really know how else to get into it. But I guess I'll start. Actually, before I read the list, I'll just give a quick example. So I got into art late in life. I was 23 or something. All the artists I work with and all the artists I know right now that are kind of my friends, they've all been drawing since they were children. And you can see it in their work. It looks so natural. I know they've all worked really hard to get where they're at, but all of their work, when you look at it, it's not filled with frustration like mine is. It's not, it's not, it's not second guessed. Their artwork is it's just there. It's just this fluid thing. It's this language they know how to speak. And though I feel like, I've done some good stuff and some bad stuff or whatever, I feel like all of my art really suffers from this frustration or this inability to turn off the targeting computer, to stop overanalyzing. I'm constantly thinking about stupid skills and is this right or is this wrong or blah blah blah. Like, it only sometimes do I feel like I actually get it the right way, where it feels natural and it's just kind of flowing, or it seems to happen in little segments here or there. So I've constantly been fighting against this for since I was 23, 10 years ago. So that's kind of the thing that I've been trying to overcome all of this time. So I feel like I've actually kind of made progress on that in the last few weeks in a way that I have not been able to do ever before. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm taking notes on. All right, so the first thing I wrote down, and I didn't proofread these for the podcast, so some of them might be really stupid or dumb. I don't really know, but they're mostly just for me. But
I want the raw stuff. I can very, very heavily relate to you before you had your little epiphany here. Like, the whole frustration and constant thinking of good, bad, whatever, that's me. So just give us your raw list.
It might be me next week as well, also. Like,
but
I recognize that. But
yeah, even a glimpse of purity is better than nothing.
Okay, first thing I wrote down is, you're not training you, you're training your second nature. Okay, so this is something that actually probably everything we talk about today is mentioned in The Inner Game of Tennis. So just recognizing that's a great book, and it kind of sent us off in this direction. But okay, you're not training you, you're training your second nature. This was a big epiphany for me. So in the past, whenever I think, as an artist, I want to improve, I think about, or I look at stuff and I say I see a really good painting or whatever. I think, I want to be that good. I wish I was that good. So I kind of see it on this high level. And I think, okay, in order to be that good, I have to do this, this, and this. So I try to do all of those things to try to get me to that point up on the mountain. And it's always a lot of work, and it's very stressful, and it's very frustrating. And I just seem to struggle all the way there. And sometimes I learn things and they stick, and sometimes it works or whatever, but it always feels like it's just this uphill battle of trying to learn these skills, and then it's frustrating and whatever. So, and that's just kind of how I've always treated skill building or just improving at art in general. So, but the single thread of knowledge thing that we've been talking about or thinking about, or whatever, it caused me to kind of step back and think for a second. And so a couple weeks ago or a month ago or so, I sat down with my sketchbook where I'm trying to put, everything in one sketchbook. And instead of, practicing some skill, so one day I can then enjoy drawing, I just wanted to sit down and think, okay, forget about what I want to be or what I wish I was. What is it that I can draw right now that feels completely second nature to me, that just feels so easy that I can do, even if it totally sucks? What are a couple things that I feel that I can just draw without that analysis constantly coming in? And so I started making a list and drawing just little things to prove to myself that yes, you can actually draw them without really thinking. So like number one was a skull, because I spent so much time practicing the skull. So I was like, okay, whatever, I can draw a skull. And then like number two was rocks, because half of theme parks are literally just rock work. So you end up drawing a ton of rocks at the job I have. Yeah. And then like, that's pretty lame, but whatever. Another one was like, little landscaping, grasses and bushes and stuff. I draw a lot of that too at work. So I've gotten to the point where it's just kind of automatic. And I kept going, and there was more stuff there. But I made this list and some drawings to just illustrate things that I can do out of, totally second nature. And so the following days, instead of picking something distant, picking, some epic drawing that I really like and saying, okay, I want to be that good. I got to do all these things. It was, no, let's take these little stupid things that I'm good at and let's just add one new thing to them. So well, I can't think of a specific example, but I would take one of those new objects and I would just start playing with it and just try to push it a little bit in one direction or another direction and start adding to it or combining them. So, okay, I can draw, this type of figure pretty well. So I would draw that and then I would kind of push it a little bit. I would, combine it with, I don't know, more dynamic pose or whatever. And then I would add a background. So then I would add, the rocks and the landscaping stuff. And then all of a sudden I have an entire picture in front of me that's completely second nature to me. None of it included any sort of analysis at all. It's just complete natural ability. And it felt amazing. And I'm like, okay, well, that seems to be working. Instead of aiming really far, I'm taking these tiny little things that I can already do and just growing them. So I'm not training the conscious me, I'm training my second nature. So I'm just handing it things. I don't try to control it. I'm just, here are some things that you love to do. Take them and play with them. And so that's what I've been doing every day in my sketchbook or whenever I get a chance, and just taking things that feel really good and expanding on them. And every time that the frustration starts to pop up, I know that I need to take a step back. So if it starts getting really frustrating, I step back and go, nope. I need to go back, 20 minutes and find out where it branched off at. And that has worked extremely, extremely well. I think this is such an adult problem. Okay, maybe we'll get to that in a second. But anyway, do you kind of understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Or what
actually, I think so. You're saying that you're doing something you're very comfortable with, but you're kind of putting some element in there that's a bit new. Like you're trying to push gently, it sounds like,
Yeah.
coming from this place of just comfort and confidence and not overthinking and everything, right?
Yes. Let's say you play guitar, okay, and you want to improve a guitar. Well, you want to play like Yngwie Malmsteen, right? So you think, oh well, I got to learn, all these different scales, harmonic minor scale and all theory and all everything, because that's what he includes in his music. But all you can play right now is a G chord. So instead of feeling the weight of all of that theory and all that stuff that you have to learn in order to enjoy guitar some way far off in the future, take that G chord and play the G chord. Like, play it all the different ways that you can and just really enjoy playing that G chord. And then just start expanding off of it. Move one finger, move two fingers, add one more chord that feels really good. And you just start slowly expanding. Learn your G major scale, learn your G minor scale, and your G harmonic minor scale. And then just build off of that. Just continuously, just expand and expand and expand. But you're always coming right back to that home base that feels really, really good. So in all of the art that I've been doing in the last few weeks, I mean, this has been the goal, is that as soon as I start veering off course of, oh, I don't know how to do this is frustrating, or, oh, I'm trying to use this technique, or blah, 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 it's not second nature to me, I back up. And I go back to very simple exercises or very simple things that I understand, and I go back from there. So it's like what you said, I think last episode, was it Jimi Hendrix? No, it was Steve Vai that said music is kind of like when you're writing a song, you kind of search for that loose thread. You find it and you keep pulling it, and you just kind of build off of that. That's what this feels like. It's as soon as you lose the thread, stop pulling on things, find the thread again, and then go back to pulling on it.
So I don't want to get too bogged down in this because I know you have other stuff, but this makes me think about
the same.
Okay. On the Andrew Huberman podcast, And for anyone who hasn't listened to him, if you've somehow escaped the YouTube recommendations algorithm, he is a neuroscientist from Stanford, and he has this podcast, and it's really good. And he talks about a lot of different things around health and learning and performance and stuff. But he has this one where he discusses learning and skill progression. And one of the major points that he really stresses is that you learn, like, frustration is what signals your brain to learn. And so his kind of line there, or concept he's kind of pushing is that when you get frustrated, you should push through it because that's signaling your brain to learn. And I think I really disagree with that, or at least I don't think that's the right characterization. Like, I'm pretty sure the word frustration is not correct in that scenario, because to me, I've certainly done a lot of things when I'm frustrated, and I've certainly gone deep, deep into the frustration realm, and I never, ever came out of that thinking, yeah, that was awesome. I really got something out of that. Like, it always burns me out, makes me angry, makes me just, I feel like I can't learn when I'm frustrated like that. And again, I'm kind of disagreeing with a neuroscientist here from Stanford, so that has to be acknowledged. But I think that's just not the right take. And it sounds like what you're saying is that you are staying far away from frustration as well. Like, you're trying to stay within that, like almost stay within that comfort zone.
Okay, so here's a different note that I wrote down. I said, you can dive deeper and deeper, push yourself further and further, but never let go of the rope, or you'll be lost. Always have a line back to home base. So, yes, push yourself. Feel uncomfortable, It's okay it's good to feel uncomfortable. It's good to push yourself out of your comfort zone. But frustration, think about, I totally agree. Think about what frustration is. It's your brain feeling this dissonance between two things, or of a situation or whatever. It's your brain telling you, like, as an animal, something's bad, something's wrong. Like, frustration is a signal that something is wrong.
Right.
Though I think you're right that the term is probably too nondescript.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've been frustrated for a decade on art stuff, okay? And I'm frustrated because I'm not improving. That frustration doesn't make me improve. Like, I'm sure there are different, I don't know, scenarios you could analyze, but right. I agree. To me, when I'm learning, it's a feeling of uncomfort, or feeling uncomfortable, but it's not necessarily frustration.
Yeah.
It feels like you're free falling or floating or something. Like it's a weird feeling. But yeah, I'm in my terms, I guess I'm trying to avoid frustration by every time I run into that analysis where I'm overthinking things and it becomes frustrating, I back up, find the place where it felt second nature to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
to me, now that I kind of think through it a little bit, I think the hang up for me is that frustration, at least in my mind, in the way I categorize that feeling, it has a distinct element of helplessness to it. If I'm lifting weights and I'm lifting really hard, and I'm let's say I beat my max or something, right? Like, I go for a really heavy bench press and I eke out 2 more pounds than I ever have before. That's super hard, but that is nowhere even close to frustrating. That is euphoric. That is an amazing moment for me, even though it's very difficult. To me, frustration is when I try as hard as I can and I miss it, or I can't even lift as much as I did before. That's frustrating. And it has nothing to do with the difficulty necessarily. It's that feeling of helplessness of, I was working so hard and I'm not getting better. That's frustrating. So to me, that's like a shared element of anxiety and, despair and all kinds of very negative things that we acknowledge and experience. And that's the element that I find that is unique to frustration, is that feeling of helplessness. And I think what you're saying is you're trying to avoid that really at all costs. You're constantly moving yourself back to something that you are, more comfortable with, even if you are pushing yourself and it's difficult.
Yeah. So here's an example. In the past, whenever I do a painting, like a big oil painting or even stuff on the computer or whatever, there's this level of frustration sort of baked into it where when I stop painting, I can't think about art. I can't switch to drawing something else. I need to walk away and I need to do something else, and it's just sort of heavy. Uh, Sometimes it differs here or there, but for the most part, usually when I'm painting, at least for this exact painting that I've been working on for the last 6 months or so,
Mhm.
after a few hours and I'm kind of done with painting, I can't do any other type of art. I just need to walk away. I need to do something else and just not think about it because it's just sort of heavy and I need to go relax somewhere. The last few weeks, yesterday I painted for 3 hours, and I could talk about that process too, but I painted for 3 hours, turned the timer off, sat down with my sketchbook, drew for another 3 or 4 hours, and I feel great. Like I'm feeling amazing, and I just want to keep going and going and going. And part of that is probably just natural momentum. Like I've been pretty consistent with this in the last few weeks, so there's less resistance. But I don't think in a decade I've ever really felt this energized about drawing and painting, and like none of it's heavy. I'm just like moving from one thing that feels natural to the next thing that feels natural. Not to say that certain things aren't difficult or there's a little frustration here or there, but for the most part, like I am just sitting down, grabbing a sketchbook, drawing, standing up, walking over, whatever. Like
Mhm.
it's just I'm flowing in and out of it and not feeling any sort of weight. And any mistakes that I'm making, it's just interesting to me now. I mean, I hope it stays this way. Um, but if I make a mistake, it's, oh, cool. How do I fix this? Let's go back to this. Let's see if we can weave this in there. Let's try a few different other things. And I'm filling up entire pages instead of just doing one drawing on a page or whatever. I know that's specific to me, but it's just totally different mindset than what I've had before. So yeah, I guess I am saying that I'm totally avoiding frustration, and it's filling me with like energy. I just want to keep
Yeah.
going and going. I almost didn't want to do the podcast because I just want to sit down and draw more, and I've been drawing all day long. I mean, I just like I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Again, I really hope it stays this way.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
definitely setting yourself up for disaster.
yeah,
But
yeah,
again, whatever, even if it's a few weeks, that's really cool. So
yeah.
so it sounds like you aren't being, like you said, you make a mistake and it feels interesting to you, not, oh my God, I'm bad at art and I hate myself, right? You aren't creating a narrative out of that. You're just engaged with that mistake as it's for its own sake. Like you're just trying to figure that out and what's in front of you.
Yes. Did you have a point to that, or was that a question?
I'm trying to assemble a question here. I'm more just interested in that. I guess that if you just say that on the surface, I'm thinking, yeah, that's where I would like to be too. That sounds amazing. I think most of us
Okay.
kind of get that that's a really good place to be, but I just want you to lay out more about how you think
Okay.
you got there.
Perfect. Okay. So I think there's a couple different factors that led me to this feeling of wonderfulness, and God, I hope it stays. But
Right.
about a month ago, I started the life drawing class, right? And a couple weeks ago, all right, we'll set aside the life drawing class for now. A couple weeks ago, we had this big meeting at work, and it was an entire week long. They moved all of the artists into one room, which we have never done before. All of the artists into one room where we would be drawing all day long, every day for the whole week. And they flew in all these clients from all over the world, from I don't know how much I can say, but from all over the world. There were like 20, 25 people in one room. This was a huge workshop meeting for the whole week. So there's a lot of pressure. And basically their idea was, we're going to go through this master plan of this thing, and whenever we change stuff, we're going to have the artist draw it and then show everyone, all these really important people. And they're just going to watch you draw, and it's just going to be this super fun thing. And me, I hate when people watch me draw. Like, I hate it. I like, put me in a corner, leave me alone. I'm just going to close my door, go away, and I'll give you a drawing, when I finish, maybe, if I like it. Like, working in an open office is hard enough, but to do something like this in front of clients, in front of important people, just watching your every move, that to me sounded like total hell. And for the first day or two, it was. I really hated being watched. I hated that they could see my drawings. I hated that no matter if they were good or bad, they're going up and people are looking at them. But by the third day, I kind of just got over it. I don't know how exactly. I think part of it was I kind of figured out the pace of it, and I was able to get my drawings to a point where I wasn't embarrassed of them. So I think that was a big part of it, where, okay, now I'm kind of proud of my drawings. They're not so awful like they were the first and second day. But having that workshop kind of changed something in my head, where my third note in here is always imagine the baby learning to talk. They always start or lead with what they know or enjoy and branch out from there. I'll get back to the meeting. But if you think about a baby, you don't say to, an infant, say, I'm hungry, I want food. All right. And then you have the baby try to figure out how to say that. You don't do that. They say goo goo, and then they slowly learn how to say goo goo gaga, and then they learn how to say goo goo gaga, blee blue, blee blop, or whatever. And they just keep going. They love to say, as soon as they learn, and you can watch them, as soon as they learn, one sound that they can make, they just love to make it, and they just keep making it over and over and over again. And then they'll add something else on there, and they just kind of grow from there. And it's just constant enjoyment in learning how to talk. And that's weirdly what was kind of happening in the workshop meeting, is that I didn't have the option of hiding. I didn't have the option to walk away and practice something and then come back and deliver it. It was just this constant, it was like the baby. It was whatever I'm doing, it's just there. Like, I don't really know how to describe it, but there was nothing to lose. And I think I even wrote that down. But anyway, there was nothing that I could lose. I had already lost it the first few days. So it was just all upwards. It was all just, it kind of just turned into enjoyment all the way through. Okay, maybe the life drawing class will make more sense.
You're saying that I'm trying to interpret that a little bit, but you're saying that at some point it felt like there just wasn't anything to hide, or you aren't, in a sense, you can't really analyze something as good or bad or not because it's just there and exposed to everybody. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah. And so you lose this, this isn't good enough, or this is bad, or whatever. Right. You lose that completely, and it's just this fluid thing where you're just delivering, you're just drawing. It's the pure process. There is no result. There was no result because they were seeing it the whole time. Yeah. So there was no end product. It was just this constant drawing. So in the life drawing class, kind of the same thing. I go there, and it alternates from week to week, but 1 week it will be short poses. So you'll do 2-minute poses. You'll do like 5 of those. Then you'll do 5-minute poses, then 10-minute poses, then 20-minute poses, whatever, and then it ends. The next class is 20-minute poses, and you take a break, whatever.
What is the media here? Are you doing?
I'm doing big charcoal drawings.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So say like the 2-minute poses. You very quickly scribble something in 2 minutes, whatever. Turn the page, you do another one, and another one. And the timer goes off, model switches, you do another one, another one, and another one. And it happens so fast. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them are god-awful and terrible. They don't look like humans at all. They look like weird aliens or something. But you keep drawing, and everyone can see what you do. Say like after a 5-minute or a 10-minute pose, you take a break, and everyone kind of walks around and looks at what you've drawn. And I had to go through the hellish feeling of having people just look at my awful, like horrible work and just feel that like wash over you, and you
Yeah.
just hate yourself and hate everything, and you want to tell them, no, 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 I swear I could do better, but you just shut up and take it, and they see it. Well, after a while, you kind of just get used to it, where you do a drawing, whether it's good or bad, and then you turn the page and you do another one, and then you turn the page and you do another one and another one. So you stop seeing these drawings as a finished product. Like, that stops being a thing, and it just becomes this process. I mean, we say it all the time, you should focus on the process, not the end product. Well, having this environment, both this workshop and the life drawing class, where it forces you to not have an end product, where it's just process, 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 and that's the only thing. It's incredibly freeing. And so I started carrying that into my art at home. So the way I was working on my painting that I have felt stuck on for so long, I decided, okay, well, it's whatever I'm doing at life drawing class seems to work now. Like, it's working, where I'm not getting attached to the drawing. I'm just continuing to go. Like, it feels really good. So at home, I set up my painting on the easel at the same height I would have it at the life drawing class. I put on the same music that they play at the life drawing class. And I used the same intervals of time. So I set, 20 minutes, whatever, and then I would take a break. And I did that for 3 hours, and then I couldn't paint anymore, because that's how it is at life drawing class. You go to the class, and then you leave
Yeah.
after 3 hours, and that's that. And whatever you have is what you have. So I did that exact same system for my painting at home. And it was amazing, because the reason why I think it was amazing is because I was able to kind of feel the same way I did in life drawing class, which is there is no end product. Just enjoy the process. That's all there is. You just paint, you do your best, you take a little break, you go back, you get over yourself, you just paint the damn thing. At the end of the 3 hours, you forget about it completely, and you move on to something else. And it's just so freeing and so enjoyable. I mean, there's still lots of problems to solve and things to
Yeah.
figure out, and certain things here or there that were hard, but they it's like there's a cap to them, where you'll get a little frustrated about it, and then you're like, nah, I don't care, because it ends in 5 minutes, and then
Right.
I'm out of here, and then I move on to the next thing. Like, it's just, you just keep moving. And, well, okay, do you have any comments?
Well, just one thing that made me think about is you said this is a very adult problem, getting into this particular headspace. I super agree. And what you're describing reminds me a lot of the difference between teaching children and teaching adults, or even just older kids, teenagers and whatnot, where, I'm teaching them guitar or piano or something. And if you have a little kid, with some exceptions, for the most part, they really don't have any sense of, oh man, they're looking at me, they're going to see me making mistakes. Half the
Right.
time you can't get the kid to stop banging on their guitar strings because they just want to make noise. It's in their hand, so they do. And you're trying to talk and they're just being annoying. But it's kind of a sign, like an adult would never do that. That would be a horrifying thought to them. You get them to play anything and it's like pulling teeth, or they do and they're like, oh, sorry, I was really nervous. And it's just,
Right.
there's so much, like, you can't even get past the layer of them feeling weird about doing this to actually get down into what they're actually playing and trying to figure things out and get them comfortable with playing the actual guitar. Like, you're still stuck at the they're so in their head phase. But kids usually don't suffer from that. And it sounds like you have these two environments of the life drawing class and then this thing happening at work, where it's kind of unpleasantly at first forcing you into that mindset of, okay, everybody can see everything I do, and we aren't going to stop and gawk at it for half an hour. I'm just going to do it and then be done and then go to the next thing. And so it's kind of like forcing its way past that layer of that intense judging and thinking about yourself and evaluating and all that.
Yeah. I tried so I have the life drawing class, but then at home I was trying to. I signed up for this little membership where they have videos of the model posing and basically the exact same thing at as the class. And so I was practicing at home, and I'm doing the drawings. I'm taking the breaks. I'm following the time frame, and then I do this drawing, and pause the video, whatever. I take a break, and I just sit there and I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, this actually turned out pretty good. This was nice, whatever. And then I just
Hmm.
kind of leave it up for a while, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm like this good now or whatever. And then
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh my God, it's happening. This is the thing. This is the bad thing. It feels great, but this is the bad thing.
Yeah.
And if I think what's happening, and I wrote this down. Um, okay, I think this is it. But a success or failure, given any amount of time, will begin to form into an idealized event, just like the drawing was for me right then. Uh, okay, this hopefully makes sense, but perhaps evolutionarily, this was a way to tell stories of. Okay, I'll just explain this. I think whenever something good happens or something bad, so if you have a success or a big failure or whatever, you look at that and your brain starts to idealize it, either good or bad. It sees it as like this idealized event. And for the longest time, I've always seen that as just this weird alien thing that we do. Why do we do that? Is it just to make us feel good about ourselves? Like, why is it that we idealize things?
Hmm.
Why do we take, I don't know. I never really knew, and maybe I still don't know. But I was thinking that it could be that what happens is when something good or something bad happens, it gets flagged as important. Okay, so your brain wants to remember it, and it idealizes it. And what idealizing is basically trimming all the fat from the event in order to get it ready for storytelling. In order for you to be able to explain it to someone else, it idealizes it, wraps it in this little package, and makes it able to be shared.
Hmm.
Okay, so if you succeed at something, your brain starts going, "Oh, this is important. I need to share this with someone." So, because I don't know, that's how humans learn from each other and whatever. But and I think that's a good thing. But what happens is that it changes the focus from the thing itself to the end product. You then begin to focus on the end product, and
Right.
that sort of takes the place of your mental model of what was there before. And so next time you do a drawing, you're not thinking of how to make a good drawing. You're thinking of your previous drawing and how to recreate that situation or that feeling. And same thing when something bad happens. I don't know, maybe that's a different topic, but it plays into all of this because if you allow yourself to idealize, sit there and just ruminate over a
Hmm.
success or a failure, it starts to take the place of the mental model thing. And next time you go to do it, you're going to be trying to replicate that product, not the process.
Hmm.
And and so these two environments of the workshop and life drawing class, they force me to not be able to do that because as soon as you're done, it's gone. You're on to the next one, and I really like that. Um,
Yeah. That reminds me of a couple things. One, so Tim Gallway in The Inner Game of Tennis, which if anybody hasn't read that, super recommended.
right.
Um, but one of the things he kind of discusses, he gives this example of him coaching this women's tennis group and how he has all these different techniques to try to get people out of their head and to they're just kind of imitating a swing and not really thinking too hard about it and letting their body adapt to the tennis swing and all that. So this is a big area of focus for him and how he does this. But he's teaching this group of women, it's like a forehand, cross court forehand, something like that. And so he's hitting them balls, they're hitting them across the net, and they're just doing incredibly well. He's really just trying to lean into these coaching methods of not overthinking, not evaluating, just keeping your mind on the game itself. And they're just killing it. Like everything's going in, it's going deep, it's just perfect. And he tells them, "Oh, you're all doing amazing. You know, that's like 30
Right.
balls in a row that have gone right into the cross court deep. And then, of course, immediately right after that, everybody starts missing. And
Yeah.
he's kind of talking about it later. He's even talking about it with the women. And I forget the exact way it shaped up. It's been a while since I read the book, but one of the women was just kind of had this epiphany of, oh, you gave us a compliment, but that's still an evaluation. It's still, it probably, most people acknowledge that you shouldn't insult people and say, wow, everybody sucks right now. You're really doing terrible. Like, that's probably not great. We all get that. But something positive still kind of does the same thing. And you're implying that, okay, you're doing really good now, but you weren't before, or sometimes you are. Like, there's just, no matter what, it's a judgment on the situation, and that's the opposite of the way you want to be thinking. And I think that's kind of what you're experiencing a little bit with the life drawing class and everything, is that, or what you're saying, you get done with something, you just start to think about it, whether it's bad or good. It just crystallizes into this experience that happened, and you start to create these narratives about yourself around that thing, and inevitably it just rots out your mentality, where you're no longer thinking about, you no longer have your mind in the thing you're doing. You have your mind about yourself and about how you are and about this thing that you did and that you could be proud of or ashamed of and whatever. I've experienced that so many times. It's I haven't really figured out how to get around it yet, but it's almost like anytime I do something that's really great, I get into that cycle. It's really hard to avoid that, where I just start ruminating on it and it just messes with my head.
Yeah, what's the winner's tilt? It's related to this. I can't remember if it. What is winner's tilt?
We've kind of used winner's tilt to mean different things, so we probably should decide on a specific definition. The original pitch with winner's tilt was that winner's tilt is describing when you're doing really well at something and you don't want to do it anymore. You just,
Yes.
you're when you're losing or doing poorly, it's like you've lost money at the slot machine and you just can't stop pulling the lever, where you just go and go and go because you're trying to reclaim that glory or whatever, fix it. But like, that's the loser's tilt, I guess. But the winner's tilt is when you've been doing really well and you're like, I gotta go, I gotta walk away. That's the original pitch there.
Right. So that's what I've started to be able to feel, where if especially right now, because I feel like everything's going so well.
Right.
I keep having these moments of, I'll do a really great job in the morning, and then I can't draw or something until I get home that night. And for a second, I don't want to draw because I want it to just remain really great.
Right.
But I'm realizing it's like those helium balloons or the big party balloons. After a few days or something, they kind of lose like half their helium, but they'll still float. And it's like, if you do something, if you're working hard, you do something great. It's like the balloon is sort of, sitting on the floor, but then you walk away from it and it starts to float up and float up towards the high speed fan on the ceiling or whatever. And it's like, unless you go right back and start doing something again, it keeps floating and it'll hit the fan and pop. And then you're kind of destroyed. But if you start working again, if you just get right back into it, you're pulling the balloon down right back to the floor and it starts over. It resets. Yeah. And so I've sort of obsessively been just going right to the sketchbook as soon as I start feeling that. Oh, I feel good about myself? Well, no. Let's go draw and make a mistake right now so you can come back down. So you can pull the balloon back down. So your ego doesn't hit the fan.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me a little bit of, so you and I are the snowflake generation. I think before that was the tough love generation, or the spank your kids generation, whatever. But we grew up in the era of, you tell your kids that they're special, that they can do whatever they want, that they're amazing, they're the best, that kind of thinking. And I guess I didn't read the parenting books at the time because I was the child, but I think the idea was that, you create this sense of confidence and this sense of uniqueness, and you can, and I don't think that's totally bad. It probably is some value to that, because if you look at somebody with extremely low confidence, that's not a great place to be either. But we kind of grew up in that era. But after that, psychologists kind of realized that that wasn't really the best, and that thinking that you're just amazing at stuff has a lot of problems. And so the the next generation, or maybe we're kind of old at this point, so that maybe it was the one after that, whatever, but they kind of got to this place of, okay, confidence is good, but really what we need to be focusing on is working really hard and really applying yourself to a problem. That's the thing we try to reward. Where, oh man, you focus super hard on your homework for an hour. That's awesome. That's amazing. Really well done. Not, oh man, you got your homework done. You got it all right. You're a genius. You're super smart. You're awesome. You're better than everyone else in your class. Like, there was this kind of shift, and I think we all kind of agree that that was better. That's the better way to think. So if anyone's listening who's maybe not from the snowflake generation, I wonder if it's any different for you. But it sounds like what you're really working on is fighting against that. And I like your kind of metaphor of the balloon floating up, because that is how it feels to me. It's like if I stop doing something, no matter how hard I try, there's just this gravity in my brain of creating a narrative about things, about evaluating myself and attaching myself to past experiences, whether it's positive or negative. But it's very hard to make my brain not just do that, because it wants to. It just constantly wants to. I think across society, we have a strong incentive to create narratives. You see that as a huge societal problem in news and politics and everything, where everybody needs a story. They need something to be simple, and once they attach to that, they can't detach from it. They can't understand a complex model of the world, or don't want to. But anyway, I don't know. That's just it's a very real problem for me.
I mean, there's a danger in me talking about all of this stuff, because I'm taking what was just sort of this, or what is this daily process thing, and now I'm turning it into a narrative. I am turning it into a byproduct.
Yeah.
I've baked it all into one thing that I can tell you about. And the hope is that I kind of document it or catalog it all so that I'm able to get back to it. But at the same time, it also puts me at risk of seeing it as sort of this thing that it's not really. So it could, take the place of the mental model, and then I start mimicking myself, and then I start wondering why it's not working. So that's absolutely a risk. And I think part of our frustration of this over analyzing stuff, part of our frustration at the beginning of the year was that we're constantly doing this. Everything we do, we then talk about. And so then it gets, it causes problems, even though it helps you a lot in some ways. It can also cause problems.
Yeah. One just thought I kind of just had was that a lot of those moments, like where you're really focused on painting or drawing, whatever it is you're doing, sometimes we have explicit knowledge, things that you're trying to think about and understand and memorize, and that, like, there's that layer of things that's almost always present, and that's really important. But a lot of times when you're in the zone, you aren't thinking about that stuff. It's become habitual or innate, and you're just, I think we mentioned this a little bit a few podcasts ago, but there's different kinds of thinking. You can be thinking in words and thinking in logic and reasoning through stuff, or your mind can be occupied with sensations and visualizing things and non-conscious thought. When you're really in the zone, you aren't thinking in the way we tend to think about thinking. Like, your mind is very active, but it's not active with this big narrative moving through your brain. But if you have that experience, let's say you're just super in the zone for half an hour, you're painting, you're completely invested, you're seeing things, your mind is just cranking along, totally immersed in the painting. There's no words flowing through your head. If you get done with that, you can't create a narrative about thoughts that were not verbal. right? Like the narrative, the thinking that happens after can only focus on those higher level explicit knowledge linguistic things, whereas the sensations, the you being in the zone, that's not really there anymore. You can't create narrative around that. That's why it's so hard to talk about that stuff, because it's not something that you can explicitly explain. That's redundant, but you get it. Like, you can't just lay it out like, oh,
Yes.
here's the details of this sensation that I was having when my mind was completely in the zone. That's just not really a thing. So I think that leads to that problem of the stuff that really matters in those moments you can't really think about later, or at least not in that way.
Yes. 100 times yes. Okay, so I told you about environments that sort of force you to do
Yeah.
that, but how do you do it when there isn't an environment like that? Here's something where I had a little bit of success with that same thing, where you're trying to cue the you that doesn't really think. And you
Mm-hmm.
can't really do it in a mathematical formulaic sort of way because it it doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't know, you just kind of have to let go and hope that it happens. But there are a few things that you can do. So here's one sort of simple way, but for this painting I was trying to record the whole process. So for the first time ever, I'm doing an oil painting with a giant camera in front of my face, like recording the whole thing.
This is you at
And
home, not at work,
yeah,
or
yeah. This is me at home with a big, I'm drawing it and I'm painting it, whatever. And I have my camera right there. And I turn it on, I hit record, and then I sit down to draw. And I can't draw because I'm thinking, oh my God, there's a camera on me. It's recording every single thing I do. Is my hand fitting in the screen? Why do I suck at drawing? Why can't I remember how to draw? Like, what am I going to do in the YouTube video if I make this into something? How am I going to edit this? And I'm just thinking all of these thoughts that have nothing to do with the drawing itself. And it was ruining everything and causing a whole lot of frustration. And so and I don't know why it didn't hit me earlier, but I kept trying to fight through and it just wasn't working. No matter what, I couldn't just get over it. And because you kind of yell at yourself, like, just
right.
just shut up, brain, just focus. And it doesn't ever work.
Yeah.
But I I got to the point where I started listing, what are the thoughts that I should not have? It's very hard to pinpoint the things that you should be thinking about, but it's pretty easy to pinpoint the things that you shouldn't be thinking about. So I wrote down, the YouTube video when I finish this. I should not be thinking about that when I'm trying to draw. So as soon as the camera goes on and I hit record, I have to stop thinking about that completely. There are no thoughts to be had of any YouTube video that I might make afterwards. There are no thoughts to be had of the camera above me or the recording or the framing or anything. Anything to do with that recording, totally out of my brain. And the first time I did it, it was kind of, you have the thought of, oh, am I in frame or whatever? And then you say, no, that's not right for right now. And you just kind of let go about it, or you let go of it and you shift your focus back to the drawing. And over time, I actually got pretty good at just letting go. And you start to recognize you recognize the thoughts that are not welcome, that don't belong in that
Mm-hmm.
in that time frame. And you kind of get good at just letting them go. And then you swing back to what really matters. And so for many things, I've started doing that. And we talked about this a long time ago, but having different categories of stuff at work. If I'm working on the drawing, I'm not going to be thinking about color. If I'm working on the tonal composition, I'm not thinking about color. I'm not thinking about perspective or drawing or whatever. I'm thinking about the tones in the composition. Like, beginning to sort of weed out the thoughts that don't belong really helps in being able to get into that zone. And so, like with the life drawing class, the first few classes I'm going in and I'm like, okay, this is it. I gotta remember everything I learned and I gotta draw really well and remember proportions and perspective and drawing and charcoal and blah, blah, blah. And so when I go to draw and I finish it and I back up, the only things I can see in my drawing, the only things that are being expressed are these stupid, hollow, empty skills that mean nothing. Sure, I got my proportions right, but what is she doing? I don't know. Yeah, you used your charcoal really well, but who cares? Because you're like, there's nothing interesting there. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at all of these other artists, and maybe their skill with charcoal isn't great, but their drawing is really good because they only thought about what really mattered.
Hmm.
And so for the last class or two, I decided, okay, when I walk in there, there are no thoughts to skill building, to any sort of technique. As soon as I walk in that door, you do not think about that at all. The only thing you think about is what you really want out of the drawing. What do you want to express? What is it in the model that you want to see in your drawing? That's the only thing you think about. And everything that you've learned is a way to achieve that result. And if it's not second nature, if you have to analyze it, you leave it out completely. The only thing that you should be using, and this is why I was saying at the beginning that you're not training you're training your second nature. The only thing you want to use in a moment like that, in your actual performance, is second nature. You don't want anything else in there. So anything that you have to analyze or think about or try to apply, leave it out completely. Whatever you walk in the door with in your second nature is all you have. And that's all you use.
Yeah.
And that's it. Later, you can work on some skills or whatever. But when it comes time to perform, to do that, to really execute the drawing, or, when it really matters, everything is gone except for what you have included in your second nature, or what you have adopted into your second nature. So you put the targeting computer away and you just use the force. And over time, you want to continue to build the force. You want to make your force stronger. But in that moment, there is no targeting computer. There is no thought of skill whatsoever. It's just you
Right.
and the picture, and that's it. And that way of thinking has really helped me. And so if I have a thought of, oh, I want to make sure I do this right, or I need to get this right, or I want to make the perfect line or whatever, I know that's a bad thought. Leave it out. The only thing I want to be thinking is what I want out of this picture. And if I was writing a song, it would be the same thing. It would be, there's a time to practice your skills and work on these little, specific skills. But when you're writing a song, whatever you have in second nature, that's all that belongs in the writing process. That's it. Leave everything else out. Or else you end up with this weird incidental stuff that doesn't matter. Remember Dream Theater?
Hmm. Sure.
I really like Dream Theater, and I think a lot of people really like Dream Theater. But the single complaint you tend to hear about Dream Theater
The vocalist.
is that I'm leaving him out a little bit, but yes, even him, is that Dream Theater is this extremely talented group of people that write really cool music. But they will have a song that is simple and beautiful, and you're just, man, this song is great. And then the bridge comes 2 or 3 minutes in, and they go way off on this crazy tangent where they just have to show off every single technical skill they've ever learned in their entire life. And yeah, it's impressive, but it totally ruins the song, and it takes you out, and you just, now, I'm sure everyone's opinion differs on this, but that seems to be the main complaint with Dream Theater.
I think that's a fair criticism of Dream
It's pretty
Theater.
fair. And yeah, we love them for it, but at the same time, it's, God, you just ruined really beautiful music to throw in all this technical bullshit that no one cares about. It's impressive, but there's no feeling in it. And if you're writing a song or painting a picture or drawing or whatever, and all you're thinking about is the skill, it works its way into the expression. And you don't want that because it's poison to an honest expression in a creative endeavor. Anyway, okay.
Okay, I have one comment and then one question. So, what you're describing about identifying those thoughts that you don't want to be having during that moment, that sounds a lot like the cognitive behavioral therapy technique of noting. Noting is very simple. You just make a mental note when you have that kind of thought. That's literally it. You might have a word where so I experienced this. I was having a really hard time a little while ago last year when I was having some issues going on with my eyes, and I got a potential glaucoma diagnosis and a bunch of sort of conflicting information. Anyway, I had like a lot to worry about with my eyesight, and I was kind of seeing funky things, and it was very worrisome. But the problem was that this this just stretched out over many months, and it's I mean, the fact like if you're seeing stuff in your eyeballs, that means that you're like that's all the time, unless you have your eyes closed, and even then I would still see stuff with my eyes closed. So it's hard to not think about it when you see it constantly.
Right.
And I was really, really struggling with just worrying about this at every moment. It was just this baseline thing that just rode along with me and my life for months there, and I was like really struggling with it. And so I'm like, I don't really know how to deal with this. I can think about it all day long and it doesn't help. I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is right now. I'm not gonna know for a while. Waiting on tests, whatever. And it, by the way, it all turned out to be probably fine. Pretty sure it's fine. But, even that, still get to worry about that. But I was just really struggling with these thoughts of what was that? What's going on? Are your eyes ruined? Are you going to be blind in a few years? Whatever. So I started just trying to use that technique of, okay, anytime my thoughts go that way, I'm going to pause. I'm just going to make this mental note of, hey, I'm worrying about my eyesight right now, and it's not productive because I know there's no new territory I can cover with my thoughts. So let's just make a note of that and then go back to whatever I was doing a minute ago. And yes, I see weird stuff in my eyes and it sucks, but I can't really think about that because there's just nothing to be done. And so I was just implementing that technique of noting. Anytime I start thinking that way, make a mental note of it and then just go back to whatever you're doing. And it's stupidly simple, but I found it extremely effective in a way of trying to divert those thoughts where you develop this almost reflexive response to that, where as soon as I would start to worry about this, it's like, okay, doing that again, back to the thing. And
Right.
I think a lot of us understand that there's thoughts that you don't want to be thinking at certain times. For one, a good first step is to figure out what that is and identify that up front. But then step two is, how do you actually avoid worrying about the camera that's on you? I mean, that's hard to ignore, but that's a simple technique. It sounds like what you're describing, and I found it to be really powerful. So that was a very useful thing. The second thing, which was more of a question, which is, you talked about performance and how you're going in somewhere, you're trying to do your best work. And so in that moment, there's no room for thinking about skill building and, evaluating and that kind of stuff. Like, those are the thoughts that are inappropriate for that moment. How would you contrast that experience with when you are trying to do skill building? You're trying to get better at drawing, and you were kind of talking about this at the start here of finding your comfort zone and pushing on it a little bit, but like, how are those different to you, the performance versus the skill building session?
That's a great question. And I almost feel like I want to say there isn't a difference. It's just a shift in focus.
Okay.
And because I'm thinking about how I have been working on specific skills during the week, you know, and it kind of feels the same way. It's literally just a shift in focus. So instead of trying to do, an entire figure drawing and get it, get the composition to look good and make it, express the feeling that I want out of it, I'm focused on, okay, how does a leg work? But in that drawing, I'm focused on the forms or the anatomy or just how to get the lines right or whatever. And it's still the same. I'm thinking about different things, but I'm still trying to tie it to the second nature because, like I said, that's what you're training. So I'm taking what I do know, trying to push it in the direction of that skill, you know. Yeah, it really kind of feels the same. It
Yeah.
really does. It's just a different zone of thinking. Um, yeah, it's a different end goal, but you still kind of use the same process. You still want, at least that's what I have been doing, and it's been working great for the last few weeks. Is that I'm always trying to just use my second nature. It's just that I'm pointing it in a different direction at different times.
Okay,
If
so
that
you
makes
gave
sense.
you gave the example of you go into this class, you're doing the figure drawing or the live drawing stuff, you're using
Yeah.
charcoal, and so you're too focused on your charcoal technique and not on the actual, drawing itself. Let's say you did want to focus on your charcoal technique. Let's say you're
Right.
thinking, man, I don't think I actually handle charcoal all that well. What would you do in that scenario?
Okay, so I literally did exactly that. And I was having a lot of trouble with charcoal stuff. It's way more complicated than you think because there's different ways to sharpen it, and you have to use like a blade, and you don't have to, but that was one thing that I wanted to do, but I was putting off. Anyway, it's sort of a separate skill. So when I went home one of the days of the week and I had a little bit of extra time, I wanted to focus on just that, on just literally the charcoal itself and how to use it. So, yeah, I look up some tutorials or whatever and I kind of learn how to sharpen it. And then I start practicing using it. And in that moment, I'm just worried about the charcoal. I
Mhm.
just want to be able to make a curvy line, a C curve or an S curve, or draw a circle or sphere, cube or whatever. In that moment, I want to leave out all the other stuff. I'm not trying to express myself with a little curvy line. I'm not trying to develop a perfect composition. I'm not trying to do a good drawing. I'm just trying to get used to how the tool moves. And so
Mhm.
in that moment, I'm trying to connect it to what feels good and what I know in other mediums. And how do I make this curve and this sphere and whatever? How do I connect that to all those other things? It's just then you leave out all of the other stuff. You know, you have to think about what to leave out in order to
Yeah,
have a sort of a pure focus on the thing that you're working on.
that's
Does that
interesting.
answer your question?
I think so. It's I mean, it's not a formula exactly, but I think I get it. I think it
But
it falls
it
into that category of thing that's a little bit hard to nail down on
right.
paper.
But I would say that okay, that one might be pretty easy to explain away. But okay, say that the guitar player with the G chord, their home base is that G chord. They just love the G chord, which often enough is actually the case with
Yeah.
most people.
Yeah.
But they love the G chord, but they need to work on their speed, and they need to get super fast. I would suggest starting with something like the G major scale. Make it close to home. Make it close to their
Mhm.
home base, so they recognize you know where their fingers are with the G chord in the G major scale, and that might help them. That kind of gets their foot in the door for the next skill. So yeah, they're working on a new skill. They're playing a scale really fast, but it's connected to their
Yeah.
home base, to their main line of knowledge. And so with any skill building, that's what you want. You want that connection. And
Mhm.
that's what I've been realizing lately is that it's all connected. Everything's connected. And okay, so in the past, I practice things at home and then I go to work and I do art, but it's different art. And then I come home and I do things at home. And in the past, I have developed this bitter taste in my mouth for work stuff. Not that I hate work or anything like that. Like, there's a lot to
Yeah.
enjoy about work. But when I'm working on my home art, I just kind of began to despise any thought of what I did at work or any sort of freelance stuff. It's like I wanted to keep it all separate.
Mhm.
It's like, no, you pay me for my time, but I'm not on your time anymore. Like, just leave
Right.
me alone. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So they became these completely isolated disciplines where I go to work, I do that thing, I come home and I do a totally different thing. Well, in the spirit of trying to connect everything together into this main line of knowledge or experience, what I what I've been doing is including what I do at home, trying to feed it right into what I do at work an hour later. And then whatever I do at work, I try to write it in my sketchbook when I get home and try to get rid of that bitterness and resistance. It sounds weird, but I really
Yeah.
just
Oh,
anything.
does not sound weird to me at all. That is
Okay.
totally where I'm at.
Well, it's very damaging. This is what I'm realizing after treating the last few weeks like this is
Yeah.
that there are so many things that I'm learning at work that I just refused to acknowledge when I got home before. But now I'm taking that and then I'm just sort of reapplying it to the stuff that I really care about. And then it just keeps feeding. So I've been learning a lot at work and then coming home and feeding it right back into the main line of
Yeah.
knowledge. And it keeps the momentum going. So instead of working for an hour in the morning and then 12 hours later getting back to it, it's I work in the morning, I drive an hour to work, and then there's a couple things where I actually can loop it together or link it. And then it kind of keeps that same main line going. It
Yeah.
keeps the momentum moving forward, even if it's just a little bit. It keeps me interested and it keeps me recognizing things. And forgot what I was going with that, but
I don't know. That sounds like something because I'm definitely in that boat of, work is work, and then my stuff is my stuff, and that's cool and something I care about. But then work, it's just kind of something I have to do, and I exchange time for money. That seems like a really great place to be in a way.
okay, this is where I was going. You said, how do you treat, a performance versus skill building? I I'm saying this, I don't think it's actually different. And if I think back to when I used to play guitar and the stuff that really worked, is I would always kind of feed it back into the main line. I would learn a new scale or whatever, or some cool new exercise. I would learn it, and then I would just find ways of incorporating it into the stuff that I wrote. So I just play around with it and mix it back in, and that playing around with stuff is
Mhm.
your way of tying it back into everything that you already know, tying it back into the main line of stuff. And so I don't think working on skills should be any different. It shouldn't be an isolated thing. Or if it is, it's only for a little bit, and then you have to
Mhm.
find the connections again. And that's what I've been failing at so much is I work on this art skill in isolation, and I don't want to tie it to anything else or don't know how, and then it just dies off. And then I work on another thing in isolation and it dies off. There's a huge skill or benefit to practicing the connection of how they relate to things that you already know in your
Mhm.
second nature, you know?
So I've been started taking notes during our podcast, by the way, which has been helpful.
Okay.
Um,
I do that sometimes too.
yeah, which is nice. Um, but there's kind of two main themes that I've been sort of pulling out that I personally want to really work on and try to develop. One is the idea that you kind of pitched at the start of finding an area that you're very comfortable with. I really like your comparison to a baby, where you kind of learn simple words and then you expand out of what you know and add things and start just slowly growing out of this very
Right.
simple starting place. I like that concept. So that's something I want to try to work on, is connecting things to something I'm familiar with and sort of adding one new thing and expanding from there. I like that a lot. The other is just the basic idea of going to do something and then identifying what things you're allowed to think about and what things are off limits.
Right.
Like you said, you're going in there to create this drawing of some person, and so you're just focused on the drawing and what you're capturing and the expression of their pose and all that stuff. You aren't obsessing over your charcoal technique or the person looking over your shoulder, that kind of thing. Like, you're just deciding the scope of your thoughts and what the focus is going to be and then staying on that. Whereas if you're trying to learn your charcoal technique, that's the thing you're focused on and you're not focused on other stuff. That sounds really simple, but I know that that's not something I usually do. Just kind of let the
Right.
thoughts happen the way they happen, and that's that. And I really really like that concept. That's something that I think will probably take a lot more practice than it seems,
It's
but I would like to work on it.
it will be an ongoing thing forever. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I'm gonna constantly, because your example of the Skittles. Okay. If you have a bowl of Skittles on your kitchen table and you walk by it every day, you have to make the choice of, do I eat the Skittles? Do I not eat the Skittles? Eventually, you're going to eat the Skittles because they're right there and you have to make that decision
Right.
constantly, over and over and over again.
Right.
But if you say no to the Skittles at the store, you only have to make the decision once
Right.
and then you're good. That's what you want out of all these different things that you do, is that you want to decide up front. Am I going to be if I'm doing a drawing and I have a camera on me, am I going to be thinking about how I'm going to edit the video and whatever constantly throughout the entire drawing process? Or do I just decide up front, as soon as I hit that record button, I pay no attention to the camera whatsoever? I don't think about if I'm in frame. I don't think about whatever. I don't think about that at all. I say no to the Skittles at the store, and then I go to the drawing.
Right.
And it's the same way with, if I was writing a song, you work on your scales and you work on speed and you work on theory and you work on all that stuff. But when you go to actually write a song, the only thing you think about is what you actually want from the song and the expression that you're trying to get out of it or put into it. That's it. Forget about your speed. Forget about trying to show off. You don't want to be, I love Dream Theater, but you don't want to be Dream Theater in some of their songs where they just go off on a tangent of skill. It's hollow, and nobody really cares about that. They want something pure and meaningful. And the only way to do that is to leave out all that other stuff. And so that's sort of what I've been trying to do, is say no to the Skittles at the store. Say no to those thoughts at the beginning, or decide what you want. And it's, an ever evolving thing, obviously.
Right.
But okay, the other thing I was going to say is, okay, say you want to work on this stuff. I've been wanting to work on this stuff for a decade, and I've been trying really, really hard to overcome certain things. And I'm going to struggle with this forever and going to try to keep improving, whatever. But the things that actually seem to have solved it, at least in the last couple weeks, thank God, have been external. They've been outside of me. And I said this like a month ago or so, is that I think there's something to that. And so I've started to notice that, and I wrote this down. I said, external pressure seems to bring out your second nature, and internal pressure seems to diminish and destroy your second nature. And if you think about it, now, technically everything is internal pressure, right? Like, you experience life. I mean, all your experiences are technically internal. But there's a way of thinking about things that changes. And I don't totally understand this, but remember the Batman effect. The people who did the best were the people who were furthest away from themselves. They view themselves as like distant. Right. The people who did the worst are the people that are constantly thinking about what they want and how they feel, and they're just wrapped up in their heads. And I've noticed for myself, when I sign up for something external, like this life drawing class or this workshop at work or the little obstacle race thing that I'm going to do, whenever I sign up for something external, when I put myself into that environment or situation, my second nature kicks in and I overcome obstacles in a way that I cannot do on my own, no matter how well or how disciplined I am on my own, which I think I'm pretty disciplined and I'm pretty good on my own. There are limits to what I can achieve by myself. And it's only when these external forces are introduced that I'm able to tap into that second nature and overcome the obstacles. And it's no wonder that that's the case, because that's how humans have existed since the beginning, is we are built to overcome these external forces, these external obstacles thrown at us. We're built to react to them. And so, of course, we are at our best when things are being thrown at us that we don't expect, and we're having to be on our toes and react just off the cuff. And he even talks about that in Inner Game of Tennis, is that if you want someone to do their best, if you want them to play their best game, you have to give them the most unexpected return. You know, you have to push them to the point where they can't think anymore. They can't analyze it.
Mm-hmm.
They're just reacting in the moment. And that's what I think these external situations give me, is this chance to operate more in my second nature. And so I am now looking actively for ways of engaging in the, I don't know, in stuff outside of me, which brings me to another. I wanted to say, this is kind of off topic, but for this painting that I've been working on for like 6 months, I've decided that I am either going to finish it by the end of March or I'm going to burn it. And I was saying that publicly because I want it to be a public thing. I will either, I'm not going to post it on the 31st of March, but I will either have a video of me making the piece or a video of me burning the piece. Okay.
I like that.
So it is now in public, and hopefully that kicks in some of my second nature and really gets me to finish it. But anyway,
I like that. And you're no stranger to burning paintings either, so that's not an
I've
empty
done it
threat,
like
for
once
sure.
before. Actually, I've burned a lot of drawings. It's kind of cathartic, actually.
I like how you
But
you objected and then immediately said no, actually a lot.
yeah. Well, the thought is that I want to treat this just like life drawing. And though
Yeah.
I don't burn my drawings after class, it's you do the drawing and then you rip off the page and you do the next drawing. And that's what I want out of this painting. I'm doing the painting. I finish it or not, you know, time is up. It's over. Go to the next one. And that's what I want out of it. But anyway, this idea that internal pressure seems to ruin your second nature. It makes you think too much of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you analyze things too much. But external pressure seems to actually bring out the second nature in you. And I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. One quick comment on external pressure. Today, I was doing I call it my try hard run. So I have kind of a running plan, and on Sundays is the hard one where I have to work on the anaerobic threshold stuff. So I'm doing my running session, and it's 4 minute intervals of me trying to like be in zone 5, so high, close to max heart rate. So it sucks. It sucks. It's misery. And I'm going on. I do my first 4 minute stretch, and I'm just really feeling it, and I'm trying to get my heart rate up there, and it's like, oh my god, this hurts. I don't like this. And then I go to do the second little session, and then on the third one, and I'm just feeling like it's just hard. It's really hard. But I come around a corner, and there's this car that, in my opinion, was being very indecisive about what they were trying to do. But whatever the situation, somehow it kind of wound up with me like running into the street, because the sidewalk is covered in ice right now. So I'm like running in the street, and the car's kind of coming, but then he gets upset and like slams on his brakes, which he didn't need to, and I felt was unnecessary. But whatever. I'm definitely the victim in this altercation. Whatever the case, I make this car angry, and I know that they're angry at me, and we're just kind of have this little moment, and I'm like, stupid car, why can't you just be decisive and help me understand what you're trying to do, and blah blah blah. And of course, after 30-45 seconds, I'm like, holy crap, I'm running faster than I have this entire session, and I'm not even thinking about it because I'm angry at this car. And so just unconsciously, I'm doing way better than I had at any point in the run. And then once I mentally cool down, I of course come back to like, it sucks, I don't want to do this anymore. But it was an interesting moment of measurably seeing the effect of some external event on my actual body and performance in a way that was just immediate and pretty dramatic.
Right. So, yeah, I feel like we take that for granted.
Yeah.
And you can really, I don't know. For me personally, I want to start, because like this painting, it's been hard to finish. So I want to tie it to something in the real world and make it definite. And I want to keep doing that. I'm looking for more workshop type stuff and more classes, things that concretely kind of make me continue to be faced with this environment of kind of getting over yourself and just continuing on. It's hard to build that environment by yourself.
And we've talked about this a little bit in a couple of the recent podcasts. Maybe we even explore this in a full session, trying to figure out some of the external environment stuff, because that feels like a pretty big thing.
Yeah. I mean, if okay, ultra runners,
Mm-hmm.
they are totally solo. Like they are, they're by themselves and they train by themselves and whatever. But they all still compete and they'll use the term compete loosely because it's not all about winning or losing, but they all gather together and
Yeah.
do an event.
Yeah.
And really everyone has every group of performing activity has some sort of event tied to it. And that's how you know what people are great at or who's great and who's not is tied to events. And for something like painting, if you're an independent painter, there's no I mean, there are events, but I want to find them and be involved
Yeah.
with them, I think, as a way to kind of push myself past what I can do for myself.
Cool.
Is there any way we could summarize this?
I don't know. I mean, my two big takeaways were what I said, which is I want to explore what you're saying about connecting to something you're very good at, and then expanding with kind of one thing, moving out from that comfort zone, like you said, start with the G chord and the G scale, and then just expand your way into being Malmsteen from there. And then the other is identifying what to think about during some session or some moment and practicing and not thinking about the other things and really isolating your focus on something. Those are two ideas that I really want to start working on. As far as summarizing other stuff, you're on your own.
Things, yeah, simplifying things is overlooked. When I'm doing a big painting, and what I've been doing this whole time is, I'm trying to paint a picture and make it look good. I'm also trying to work on my, oil painting skills and my brush skills and I started sounding like Napoleon Dynamite there, but nunchuck skills. But you start trying to build all of these skills while you're also trying to, quote unquote, perform. But it's not the time for it. It's whatever you have in that moment is what you have to do the job. Do the job and then go work on whatever you need to work on separately and, simplify, leave things out. Yeah.
Oh, one other thing, just for the summary. I like the idea of trying to be in that place where you feel good, and it might be hard, but it feels like good effort to you. I really reject the idea of frustration being a good thing. I think frustration represents helplessness, and that's something you're trying to avoid, and it's a signal that you aren't on the right track anymore.
Yeah.
So
To combat that a little bit,
sure.
when I was talking about the workshop at work where I'm drawing in front of people, the first 2 days I was very frustrated. I mean, I was pissed off at the fact that people were watching me draw. By the third day, I had found a way sort of around it. And it could have been that frustration pushed me to learn ways to not be frustrated. And,
That's fair.
I don't think I don't think the frustration itself was the thing that I started learning,
I mean, the way I would think about, to me, it's like the frustration wasn't a sign that everything was awesome and you're learning super well. It was a sign that your mentality is not right, and you adapted to that by whether it's a combination of you thinking differently or just getting used to it and it not being as offensive. You got to a place where it wasn't frustrating anymore. So yeah, I think there's something there, but I don't like the thinking of I'm frustrated right now, that must mean I'm learning and I should stay frustrated because that's the sign of learning. I don't agree with that concept.
Right. Okay, the other thing I was going to say, it's just a tag on of, we're talking about the balloon, how it starts to float, and then you can kind of
Mhm.
feel your ego growing or whatever. Uh, I think it helps to recognize. Okay, say I do a good drawing, and then I stare at it, and I start feeling like I'm really good at art, and that makes me really bad, you know,
Right. Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the next one because I'm trying to mimic that. Whatever. That's what I'm talking about. Look for where that happens. Where does it start? Where does the balloon start to go up? For me, it's when I finish something and it turns out good. It's if I look at it. If I sit there and look
Mhm.
at it and kind of dwell on it, and I'm thinking, oh, I did good here and I did good there or whatever. And to some degree, you should review your work and know what
Mhm.
worked and what didn't. But there's a point where it starts to tip, where you start kind of congratulating yourself too much. That's where you have to cut it off. And if, okay, let's say you're writing music, you write the song and it feels great, and you've recorded it and it's done, and you know that it's good. Don't listen to it 10,000 times. I
Right.
used to do that. I would write a song, record it, and I'd be so happy with it, and I just love it that I would listen to it over and over and over again. And what that did was it started to instill this love of a byproduct. And then you start obsessing about, you become the perfectionist where all you care about is that end product, and you lose the process. So
Mhm.
write the song, record it, get it to where you want it, and then put it aside and write the next one, and just keep going and going, and learn to love the process, not the end product.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So just look for the moments where you're growing that thing that you don't want to, where the balloon starts to rise. But I think that's all I got for today.
Well, that's not that I had much to offer for today, but I'm excited about trying out some of these things.
Wait, one more thing. It's Michael's birthday, so happy birthday.
Yeah.
I
Thanks for
should
bringing
I
that
meant
up.
to mention that at the beginning, but
Right. Nobody's listening by now, so that works out for me.
right. Okay.
Cool. All right. Thanks everybody. We'll see you soon.